With evening fast approaching, the court of Lady Shawk underwent a striking change in atmosphere. The trees crowning the massive hill cast murky shadows over dark, weathered stone that seemed to absorb the light of the clear skies overhead. From within those shadows, mixed with the transient specks of daylight filtering through the leaves, countless sets of shining eyes watched as Ludmilla and her people approached. It was a reception that even those with dark vision would find daunting. To a human, it may as well have been a scene from a nightmare. "Miss Gran," Ludmilla said, "put the wands away." Nemel whimpered in protest, but the wand she was gripping in each hand vanished under her mantle before the ocello silently padding in their direction reached them. The beastman rose to its full 2-meter height as it came within a few meters. "I am Char Ac," the ocello said in a deep voice, an elder of the Pakan clan. "Rumors mentioned that our guests were more than just humans, but I am unfamiliar with any of their appearances. Dame Verilyn mentioned that those deep in the jungle have had no contact with races other than those of your confederation," Ludmilla said. "This is Kestries Esses, chieftain of the Winterscale lizardmen. This is Dial Ganzu, chieftain of the Ganzu orcs." The two offered terse greetings as they were introduced. Ludmilla gestured to the column of goblins behind her. "These green-skinned fellows are known as goblins," she said. "Their leader is Miss Gran here." "A human?" Nemel shifted under her mantle as dozens of slitted eyes focused on her. Ludmilla placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "Yes," Ludmilla replied. "Many races call our kingdom home, so you'll notice a few differences even between our humans and those you've already come to know. You say that, yet the reason why you have come is precisely what Master Leeds and his people have been promoting. It sounds like you take issue with their activities." Char Ac issued a low growl, flicking his ear several times. "I'm getting mixed messages here." The beastmen here flick their ears like that as an expression of annoyance. Overall, it's a sigh of frustration." "That was a sigh? Is there anything particularly troubling?" Ludmilla asked. "It isn't any one thing," Char Ac answered. "It's everything. You call them merchants, but they are unlike the merchants of our people. At first, we accepted them out of necessity. Now, their shadow can be sensed behind all of the clan's activities. Are you saying you've become involved in a power struggle with the guilds?" The ocello elder fell silent, the tip of his tail twitching over the broken pavement. After a moment, he gestured for them to follow him deeper into the courtyard. "Clan elders do not seek power," he said. "Our role is to serve our communities and guide the people under our care to the best of our ability. The humans, that is, Master Leeds and his followers, are very assertive about their ways. They are not openly rude, but Countess Shawk brought them to the city, intending to have us learn from them. We admit that their artifice is superior to ours in many ways, but it seems they have taken this to mean that they are superior to us in everything. They think little of what we say or do unless it serves their purposes. This sounds familiar to what happened with you earlier this week," Chief Ganzu said. "If these merchants are similarly weak, they could declare war on the guilds as you did." Char Ac stopped and turned to look at them, tail raised. War? That seems a bit extreme." "While Chief Ganzu's assessment may be accurate," Ludmilla said, "Clan Pakan is not in the position to wage an economic war as House Radnik has." "What is an economic war?" the ocello elder asked. "A conflict waged with the objective of putting economic pressure on one's adversary," Ludmilla answered. "This may be done through violent or non-violent means. Using that pressure may force concessions or discourage undesirable behaviors." "I see." They reached an especially well-maintained patch of pavement at the base of one of the blocky pyramids surrounding the courtyard. Char Ac gestured for them to take their seats in the area. As they did, the other beastmen in the courtyard stalked closer. "In that case," Char Ac said, "is there—" A high-pitched bleat interrupted the ocello elder. Voltava appeared from behind the nearest pyramid and trotted over to hop onto Ludmilla's lap. Pebble and Pinecone emerged a few seconds later, but they were content to watch the proceedings from the shadows of the trees. Char AC and the other elders stared at the ball of fluff, who yawned before curling up in Ludmilla's arms. "You were saying?" Ludmilla asked. I'm afraid my thoughts have escaped me." Ludmilla scratched Vltava under his chin. "Maybe the elder was getting too elderly. We should develop a mutual understanding before anything else," she said. "Addressing any problems without it may lead to further issues." "Yes, that would be prudent," Char AC said as he settled onto his paws. "We know little of the world outside of our jungle, yet it feels that every visitor sees fit to tell us how things should be. Are our people truly so primitive in the eyes of outsiders?" "I suppose that depends on how one measures the differences," Ludmilla replied. "Broadly speaking, the region of the world we reside in is considered an unimportant backwater, so it isn't just Roland Gork that visitors look down on. If you can communicate with outsiders without hearing their speech as a patchwork of unintelligible noise, then it means that they aren't so far removed from you that their conceptual framework has become alien to yours. What if they're purposely structuring their speech so that we may understand them?" One of the elders asked. "For instance, Vltava there is very difficult to understand even when he speaks simply. It's as if what we hear only barely scratches the surface of his meaning." "The Krokonos are an ancient people," Ludmilla admitted. "They don't even normally speak in the manner that you and I do. Have your people encountered anyone else like them?" "No. The only other visitors we received recently was a group from the Beastman Confederacy. Even they recognized the Krokonos as a people who were far more advanced than they." That much, at least, was a relief. A relief and a revelation. It was unanimous between visitors and returning travelers that their region was a primitive one. It was also said that the major powers in the central areas of the continent, which included the Beastman Confederacy, stood at the pinnacle of the world's civilizations. The fact that they recognized the ancient nature of the Krokonos despite their mostly unassuming guise lent credence to a theory that she had developed ever since her visit to Lagos. In a world where unprecedented calamities could wipe out entire empires with little to no warning, any civilization that grew too substantial stood an increasing chance of being arbitrarily obliterated as time passed. The Krokonos had avoided this by living in a remote part of the world's backwater. Not only did they choose an out-of-the-way dwelling place, but the way that they lived suggested that they were little more than nomadic family units not even qualified to be called tribes. By all accounts, the strategy worked. They claimed that their society had existed for eons and she couldn't imagine the number of civilizations they had seen rise and fall. "Did you have similar difficulties understanding your guests from the Beastman Confederacy?" Ludmilla asked. "Nowhere near as much," Char AC said. "They occasionally used terms that meant nothing to us, but they weren't a major obstacle to communication. I should also say that some unknown terms exist not because they are beyond your knowledge, but simply because there is not an accurate enough translation for them. This changes from person to person depending on their experiences. Could you provide an example of this?" "I can. Take the titles of your leaders, for instance. Originally, they were an unknown term to me. After that, I equated them to my people's system of aristocratic ranks. Then, Dame Verilyn informed me that I was wrong to do so and each rank had a different meaning from the ones I'm used to using. At the same time, there doesn't seem to be any problem translating our titles to yours." "So you are not Baroness Ludmilla?" "She is," Ilishnish said, "and she is not. Her society's title for Baroness is Baroness, but your title for her covers a range of ranks from tribal chieftain to viscount in the terms of her society." The elders regarded Ilishnish curiously as she spoke. "Why do humans have so many ranks?" Char AC asked. "Also, who are you?" In response, Ilishnish assumed her Krokonos appearance. The abrupt shift in the size of her body pushed Ludmilla aside. Ilishnish leapt away with a yowl as Vltava bit her upon being disturbed. Many of the elders rose to their feet, wide-eyed at the scene. Winter Moon. I never realized you were a human." "I'm not a human," Ilishnish said testily as she rubbed her leg with a paw. "I wasn't even a human, I was a snow elf. As for your first question, I find that the more populous a race is, the more ranks they need to organize their society. How do I fix this rank mistranslation thing? It's annoying now that I know it's happening. This was especially the case since she had heard the original titles during the initial stages of the Sorceress Kingdom's intervention in the Draconic Kingdom. That may be more difficult than it seems. What you've come up with may be stickier than expected because the original title isn't one that humanoids can vocalize in the first place. Ironically, if you do figure it out, whatever garbled approximation you come up with for the title will be perfectly translated to anyone from Roland Gork. I haven't thought that far yet. I just want to stop hearing the wrong thing. Chief S's, Chief Ganzu, what's your understanding of Roland Gork's ranks? Makes sense to me, Chief S's said. To the lizard men of the Great Lake, a chief is a chief is a chief. We only started using High Chief after the tribes allied to form one village. Most tribes in the Abelian Hills just had chiefs, Chief Ganzu said. Once in a while, a powerful individual might take leadership and style themselves a king over many tribes. That would be the equivalent of an ELN in Roland Gork, which is the equivalent of anything from a count to a king in your terms. So like the petty kings of old. How old is old? After the demon gods were defeated, the humans migrating from the theocracy lay claim to the ruins and the most powerful asserted their rule over dozens of petty kingdoms. That period did not last long, however. House Vaselv conquered the area covering modern-day Re-Estais and Baharuth, consolidating everything to establish the kingdom of Re-Estais. Many of the great houses in both the kingdom and the empire are descended from those old kings. PSH. You need to go back at least a few centuries before being considered old. Some of my siblings were already around when these kings were alive. Ludmilla rolled her eyes before turning her attention back to the discussion at hand. Elishnish's note about the use of ranks in a society suggested much about the beastmen given Ludmilla's experience with them. Despite not having what a local human would recognize as the trappings of an empire, Roland Gork appeared to be just as organized, if not more so, than the Baharuth Empire. What made it even more remarkable was that it managed this despite being several times larger. The question was how to rally the Confederation just as it so quickly had against the Sorceress Kingdom's forces. Since we're on the topic of leadership, Ludmilla said, what have the other clan heads done to address the challenges you now face? Have there been any concerted efforts to mitigate the damage? At least from my perspective, this shouldn't be a situation where the Merchant Guild becomes so dominant. They are quite averse to instability. There has been a unified response, Char AC said. We currently face two major problems. The first is the extended flooding and its impact on our food supply. The second is the escalation of hostilities by the Yorgulan Commonwealth in the east. I've heard a bit about this, Ludmilla said. You are sending extra mouths to the conflict to alleviate the food shortage. That's common sense, Chief Ganzu crossed his massive arms. If there's no food, then you must look outside of your territory for it. An active conflict is the ideal remedy. The weak will perish and trials faced by the people will make them stronger. That is indeed the rationale of the warrior clans, Char AC said. Every day, their vessels bear more people up the river to challenge their fates on the Yorgulan frontier. It is the method we have always known and it has not failed us thus far. Yet, not everyone is a warrior, Ludmilla noted. Are your civilians also sacrificed on the altar of war? Yes, this is still mostly the case. If there are too many artisans relative to the population, the work that remains will be spread thin and they will starve anyway. The beastmen's unflinching acceptance of brutal truths was far different from the response one would usually find in human society. Rather than let major problems fester, they acted to remove them before everything buckled under the strain. In that sense, the leaders of Roland Gork were more like the members of the Sorceress Kingdom's royal court than they were like the humans they ruled over. You mentioned that it's mostly the case, Ludmilla said. Has something changed? The way that our clan is contributing to the war effort differs from what was done before, Char AC replied. The last offensive of this magnitude by the Yorgulans was in my grandparents' time. Back then, there was little done to distinguish who went and who stayed. Now, however, industrial contribution is factored into our overall war potential. Those who can aid the Confederation's efforts through their skills as an artisan remain to do so. How did this shift in your wartime conduct occur? Cha AC fell silent, exchanging long looks with the other elders gathered nearby. You seem different from the other humans, he said. Even from those introduced alongside you. Why is that? It's probably because I am a member of the martial nobility, Ludmilla replied. The lord of a warrior clan, by your reckoning. Then I will say that it is because we weren't ready to send warbands to the front, the Osalo elder told her. When I look back on what happened, I still can't believe how our clan's current operations came to be. When the warrior clans first arrived to ferry people to the east, it was only through a promising endorsement that we were granted time to prepare. As you may know, our clan had only recently established itself, so this meant we were given years to train proper warbands to join the war effort. Years? How far away is the Yorgulan Commonwealth? It is on Rolengork's eastern frontier, so further from us than we are from our western frontier. I'm amazed that the warrior clans can fight for that long, Ludmilla said. The Baharuth Empire could sustain a major conflict within its borders for a month or two before things deteriorated into fragmented, smaller-scale efforts. It would only last for a fraction of that time if it was fighting outside of its borders. This was one of the main challenges faced by their newly formed expeditionary army. Operations of that scale weren't simply an exercise of military might, but also a manifestation of economic endurance and political will. Then again, different races had different requirements when it came to waging war. Smiths weren't necessary when everyone had natural arms and armor. Supply chains were simplified when every enemy was a potential meal. Conflict with the Yorgulans is a regular occurrence, Cha AC said. It is as inevitable as the coming and going of the rains. The northern frontier is just as dangerous, though nowhere near as organized. Rolengork has long adapted to these realities. The innovations being fostered by the Pakan clan will hopefully shift things in our favor. Do these innovations have anything to do with the knowledge and artifice being passed on to you by Master Leeds and his people? They would mean nothing without the leadership of Countess Shork and our people. Sometimes, I feel like they're little more than ticks infesting what's already been established and claiming credit for our achievements. Could you expand on what you mean by that? Ludmilla asked. It's simple, the Osalo elder said. They take advantage of the infrastructure we've built and trade routes our people already ply. Our clan's leadership does all the work in enlisting the cooperation of the other clans. This already sounds like a familiar tale, Ludmilla smiled slightly. Human lords and their subjects do the same, yet merchants often come in with an attitude suggesting they are the ones doing everyone a favor and that nothing would function without them. Precisely. That's the very stance Master Leeds takes. He and his people owe their very survival to us, yet they make it seem like it's the other way around. Voices of agreement reverberated throughout the court. It was a scene that could have just as easily occurred in a gathering of human nobles. How much attention have you been paying to this conflict? I'm more interested in observing how their story develops. Broadly speaking, the resistance to change is not much different from what I witnessed in the Empire. It's reliable enough to be considered a rule. There are good reasons for that. The Merchant Guild seeks to supplant traditions that have served Rolengork reliably for generations and by all accounts are still very much relevant. I wonder about that. Your friends would probably say those traditions are barely sustainable. My friends are, well, they're merchants. When left to their own devices, merchants tend to operate under the assumption that the system they developed is the only one that matters. This didn't make them one-dimensional, but it did leave everything they did full of vulnerabilities. It rarely occurred to them that a single set of rules couldn't be applied to everything and that events could exist beyond reason or prediction. In the case of the conflict between the Confederation of Rolengork and the Yorgulan Commonwealth, Ludmilla was inclined to favor the decisions of those who understood its realities over a group of newly arrived merchants who only assessed limited information according to what they considered economic prosperity. Without security to ensure order, all else was subject to the whims of anyone who possessed power over others. Have you been opposed to the advances of the Merchant Guild from the very beginning? Ludmilla asked. No, Char-AC answered. Their ways were alien to us, but we were willing to cooperate regardless. What we didn't understand at the time was that they would perceive our trust as permission to do as they pleased. Lady Shawk mentioned that the city folk aren't exactly traditional compared to those living elsewhere. She speaks truly, the Osalo elder admitted. But that only makes things more frustrating. The rise of our clan creates the opportunity for us to restore a sense of identity and belonging to the people. Instead, we find ourselves in a losing battle for their attention. The ways of this merchant guild are expedient and satisfy self-interest. It resonates too strongly with people who have lived lives where one is forced to look out for oneself. Out of curiosity, how strong are the social instincts of each race dwelling here? Social instincts? Ludmilla glanced at the different races gathered around the courtyard. Yes, such as familial instincts or how much one naturally values their group's well-being. Many assume that beastmen act in a similar manner to the animals they resemble, but that may not necessarily be the case. I can't say I've ever seen an animal that resembles an Osalo, Char-AC said, but social instincts vary between our races. Na and Osalo are the most individualistic while the other races have stronger group instincts, at least between their own races. So the clans and the confederation were something that had to be developed rather than naturally arising as the product of instinct? Perhaps in part, the Osalo elder said. The races of Roland Gork have coexisted for as long as any of our histories can tell. I wouldn't be surprised if we learned from each other's behaviors over time and found benefit in them. All I can say is that the existence of clans and the confederation as a whole has been considered a normal thing since time immemorial. Why do you ask? Because the norms of a society are fundamentally the result of how its members interact with their environment, Ludmilla replied. I was wondering whether there were any natural tendencies in each race that made them more likely to be swayed by the systems of the Merchant Guild. Once again, the Osalo elder exchanged silent looks with his fellows. We've never thought to gauge things that way, one of them said. All we can say is that every new apprentice is from the city. Those from the outlying tribes show little interest in what the humans are doing beyond obtaining tools or other useful goods. I can't agree with the idea that we may be weak against Master Lead and his ways, another elder said. Our merchants and artisans have never acted this way before. Then how did they act? They served their role in the community, the elder replied, just as a warrior or mystic serves their role. A merchant traveled abroad to obtain needed supplies while distributing any surplus. It was honest work. Are they not being honest now? Ludmilla asked. The elder bore her glistening fangs in answer. They are encouraged to gain as much as possible in every exchange. Not out of necessity, but simply because they can. Exploiting ignorance and need, how can that be considered honest? Such behavior can only lead to chaos and misery for all. As you've heard, Char-AC said, what they're doing is clearly wrong. Do you know of a way to fight this contagion infecting the hearts and minds of our people? I assume you've taken up your grievances with Lady Shawk. Yes, of course. And her response? That our situation demands we continue on our current course, the Osalo elder replied. Realistically speaking, it is the correct answer, but we fear what we will become in the process of trying to survive. You are wise to worry over the outcome, Ludmilla said. But tell me, what is your goal? Do you believe that your return as a warrior clan demands a return to tradition? Char-AC looked down at the broken pavement as he kneaded his claws against the dark stone. After several moments, he released his growly sigh. Even we understand that this is impossible, he said. We only fear being powerlessly swept away by the currents of change. In that case, Ludmilla smiled, there is someone far better suited to helping you than I. Holy crap, that was annoying. Annoying and weird. Well, it wouldn't have been annoying if it wasn't so weird. Clara was rather annoyed as well, but she knew better than to join in on Leanne's tirade. The opening stages of their trade negotiations had not gone as expected, mainly because they ended up across the table from the wrong people. She and her friends had gone into Rolengork expecting to deal with the local government, just as they had in the Draconic Kingdom. What happened instead, however, was that the local government had appointed the Merchant Guild to negotiate on its behalf. It's because we framed them as trade negotiations. In hindsight, it was a careless move, one grounded in the norms of the society she was raised in. When a government pursued trade relations, it usually signaled a desire to grow closer to the subject in question. Apparently, Rolengork didn't share the same interpretation. Trade relations meant trade meant merchants, and so Lady Shawk delegated the task to the Merchant Guild. Add to the fact that Master Leeds and his associates were from the Draconic Kingdom and thus far more familiar with the world outside of Rolengork, and it made the Guildmaster a shoo-in for Clan Paken's principal negotiator. Of course, the misunderstanding could be corrected, but the amount of influence that the Merchant Guild seemed to hold over Lady Shawk was something to be wary of. The accounting of the guilds also gave them a better idea of the costs of doing business in Rolengork, so there was merit in keeping things as they were for the short term while they developed a better picture of the region. "Let's get back to the wharf," Clara said. "Master Leeds said it won't take long for him to bring down the extra dock workers he needs." How are we gonna do that, exactly?" Leanne asked. Clara took an inventory of their surroundings. Master Leeds' party had left them on the platform and Ludmilla hadn't returned. The people from Rivergarden seemed to have gotten used to being around the beastmen, or perhaps they were only brave enough to move around in the part of the city where they lived and worked. Florine rose to her feet, leaning forward over the table to gather their remaining things. "By using our feet," she said. "The way here didn't seem much farther than walking across Rantle." "What if we get lost?" Leanne said. "Then we ask for directions," Florine replied. "What if the beastman we ask is hungry? Hey, lemme go. Why are you pushing me in front of you?" Clara followed Leanne and Florine back into the market square. As twilight approached, it felt like fewer humans and more beastmen could be seen. Leanne's resistance rose as they approached the way out of the quarter. "It's so dark out there," Leanne said. "We all have dark vision items," Florine was undeterred. "Which have limited range," Leanne said. "Doesn't the world vanishing into a wall of darkness not make you feel anything? The world is still there even if you don't see it." Logic has no place in this discussion. As silly as it sounded, Clara couldn't help but agree. No matter how she tried to reason with herself, a current of irrational fear undermined her every thought and move. They were supposed to be in a city, but it resembled a jungle more than anything else, a place where humans didn't belong, where enemies lurked in the shadows and behind each tree. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to flee to safety, but safety was nowhere to be found. Clara fingered the ring that was supposed to shield her from mental effects. Clearly, it offered no protection against her internal fears. "Excuse me," Florine asked an Osalo standing at the entrance to the quarter, "which way is it to the port?" "Follow this road around to the lift," the Osalo replied with a gesture of a massive paw. "It should be impossible to miss." "Thank you very much," Florine smiled. Leanne eyed the beastman suspiciously as Florine pushed her by. The torchlight that extended the margins of Clara's vision faded as they put the decorated lanes surrounding the market behind them, leaving her feeling isolated in the bubble of enchanted sight provided by her equipment. At some point, Leanne decided to stop resisting Florine and picked up speed instead. Clara increased her pace to keep up with her friends, and then she let out a shriek as something caught her ankles and sent her tumbling to the pavement. She pushed herself to her feet as quickly as she could and sprinted past Leanne and Florine, imagining wicked claws and teeth sinking into her delicate flesh. "You there? Stop." A Nar and an Irma stepped forward to block her escape, claws outstretched to capture her. Clara held her hands out in front of herself, screaming as she broke through them. Roars rose from the darkness she left behind, driving her flight to even greater speeds. And, then, she was free. Or, rather, she was flying. She stared at the river below as the final vestiges of the evening cast a dim glow over the jungle canopy. A crowd formed around her as she alighted on the magically lit deck of their convoy's lead ship. "My lady, are you all right?" Tyre came running to kneel beside her. She felt a tug on her shoulder. "You. Let go of Lady Corlin." "Let go?" Something was weighing down on her. She looked at her shoulder, finding a set of claws in the fabric of her dress. After a few moments of panicked twisting, she managed to dislodge 3 beastmen who had latched onto her. "Are you all right, my lady?" Clara answered with a shaky nod. "What in the world happened?" her lady's maid asked as she fussed over her. "I'm not sure," Clara said. "I should go and get changed." She was a total mess. There were tears in her dress and her carefully arranged hair had flown apart. The gossamer shawl she had purchased specifically for the trip was shredded. A sigh escaped her lips as she laid everything carefully over the edge of her bed. Lady Shawk's court received a strange report. Clara started at the sound of Ludmilla's voice, then furrowed her brow at her amused smirk. Apparently, a human ran off with 3 children and took down no less than 6 warriors as she did so, Ludmilla said. "Kidnapping, I had no idea you were such a dastardly woman." "I did not kidnap anyone," Clara pouted. "Then you will have to explain why the number of beastman cubs on our vessel has quadrupled," Ludmilla said. "Don't ask me," Clara said as she equipped the outfit that Lady Shaltir had granted her. "We were on our way back to the ships. Something grabbed my leg, so I ran." Ludmilla came over to stand beside her, casting a critical eye over the ruins of her outfit. "If you were that frightened," she said, "you should have gone with the usual dress in the first place." "I was perfectly fine when we disembarked," Clara replied, "but things got worse the longer we were ashore. My worth as a diplomat is questionable if this is how it will always be." "At least no one died," Ludmilla said. "That seems to be how the average encounter between humans and other races tends to end." "How did the negotiations go?" "The Merchant Guild negotiated on Clan Paken's behalf. That is not a problem for the time being considering the crisis that Rolengork is facing, but we have few insights on the local government as a result." "You are in luck," Ludmilla said. "The court of Lady Shawk finds itself in need of someone with your particular talents. You have another chance to make an impression over dinner." "Huh?" Clara sputtered a string of incoherent protests as Ludmilla took her by the arm and led her back to the main deck. Leanne and Florian awaited them near the top of the stairs. The 3 beastmen who had attacked Clara sat on their haunches in a row across from Florian's cub, who was watching them quietly in return. "Go on," Florian encouraged her cub. "Go and say hello." The cub didn't move. "I see things aren't going as well as you would have liked," Ludmilla said. "They've just met," Florian replied. "He's always been shy. I'm sure he'll eventually warm up to other cubs like himself." "Those cubs have parents waiting for them on the wharf," Ludmilla said, "and dinner with Lady Shawk's court awaits us." "Hold up," Leanne said. "Master Leeds is bringing some dock workers to unload our cargo." "You've already completed your trade negotiations?" Ludmilla asked. "Kinda sorta probably not," Leanne answered. "The Merchant Guild has a lot of pull here, mostly because they've been allowed to do whatever. Leeds keeps trying to bargain with us over everything." "But you told me that your offer would be more than reasonable." "It is. Normally, a merchant tries to get whatever they can get away with. When people are starving, that's usually a lot. I'd be more than happy to do that, but our objective here is diplomacy over profit." "Except we're barely getting any diplomacy done," Florian said. Lady Shawk was present, but she barely said anything. "The clan elders I spoke with had concerns regarding the influence of the guilds," Ludmilla said. "I mentioned that Clara would be able to help them bring balance to the chaotic political situation their clan currently faces." "Me?" Clara blinked. It's been at the core of all your domestic work for the past year or so, hasn't it? It is, but I can hardly say I've finished that work. If anything, it's just begun. What Ludmilla referred to wasn't any particular project, but her overall effort to transition their society into one suitable for the new realities brought about by the Sorceress Kingdom's advent. Simply put, many of their old systems didn't work, especially with the predicted rise in urban populations. It was a collection of issues that had to be actively addressed, new systems had to be engineered, or the old ones would evolve out of control and in undesirable, unhealthy directions. The state of urban centers across the region was evidence enough of that. Which is a good thing, Ludmilla said. The bulk of our knowledge and experience is based on human society. Helping the Pacan clan will provide valuable new insights. Oh, Master Leeds is just going to love that, Leanne rolled her eyes. I'm pretty sure he already sees us the same way as he does the Draconic Kingdom's nobility, and those two groups hate each other. The last thing the Merchant Guild here would want is Lady Shawk's court becoming more like them. Ludmilla narrowed her eyes. Yes, I'm sure the Merchant Guild simply loves how vulnerable Rolengork is against their methods. Hey, I didn't say I'm against it, Leanne raised her hands disarmingly. I'm just saying that what you're suggesting's gonna meet resistance the second Master Leeds catches wind of it. The guy has so much of Lady Shawk's trust that he's basically running the city's economy, and he's got plenty to leverage against any changes he doesn't like. You'd never know he's the slave here, Ludmilla muttered. Yeah, well, slaves have become kings before, Leanne said. At least that's what the tales say. The appearance of Master Leeds cut their discussion short. Leanne went ahead to guide him and his staff to the other ships while Florian herded the Beastman cubs down the gangway to their parents. My lady, Tyre asked, will we be accompanying you to dinner? Clara sent a questioning look at Ludmilla. It's safe enough, Ludmilla said. Just don't act like food. Also, bring some lighting with you. The Beastmen don't illuminate their cities like we do. What about us, my lady? Asked one of Ludmilla's subjects. It would be better to wait until tomorrow morning to investigate their markets, Ludmilla said. Not only is it difficult to see anything right now, but the people they expect us to deal with are already settling down for the night. When they went down to join Florian on the wharf, she was standing beside Boo Bibi, happily chatting with the beastmen who had come to retrieve their cubs. The cubs in question fixed their gazes on Clara as soon as they noticed her, their eyes reflecting the light from the ship above. I think they like you, Ludmilla said. They are very adventurous at this age, one of the parents said. I hope they didn't cause you too much trouble. Clara forced herself to smile in response. Does this happen often? She asked. Oh, all the time. It usually isn't a problem. Countess Shawk warned us that humans are very fragile, but the ones living here don't usually leave their part of the clanhold, especially after dark. She suppressed a shudder, recalling how firmly the three cubs had latched onto her. What would her fate have been if she hadn't been wearing her protective accessories? Have there been any incidents with the local humans? Ludmilla asked. No. We were prepared beforehand. Some guests we hosted in the past had plenty of experience living together with humans, so they advised us on the challenges we would face. Interesting, where did these guests hail from? The Beastman Confederacy, I believe. The other Beastmen voiced their confirmations. Ludmilla's look turned thoughtful. That's a useful bit of information. I agree. We must go further abroad to study how other countries facilitate harmonious relationships between races. It hardly sounded harmonious. If anything, the new information was consistent with what they already knew about places like the City-State Alliance. There were problems inherent to each race that countries were unable to resolve through centuries of existence. Unable to or unwilling. We are done here, Leanne's voice came from up the wharf. Ready to go? We are, Ludmilla replied. Master Leeds, what should we expect of this feast? We've prepared cuisine from the Draconic Kingdom, if that's your concern. The Beastmen have their own food, of course. I was more worried about the other guests I heard about. The orcs should be fine with beastman fare, Ludmilla said. Lizardmen prefer fish. Goblins are fine with human or beastman cuisine. And what about this fellow? The guildmaster asked. I don't believe we've been introduced. This is Bubibi, Florine said. She's a member of the Xian people. Bubibi, master leads of the Rivergarden Merchant Guild. The Xian, I can't say I've heard of them. What part of the world do you come from? My people dwell in the 1,000 holes of the Abelian Hills, Bubibi replied. The Abelian Hills, huh? I always thought the place was an untamed wilderness ruled by monsters. Human society may consider it an untamed wilderness, Master Leeds, Florine said. But it is home to many. Of course, the guildmaster inclined his head. Shall we be on our way? Clara observed the man as he guided them back into the clanhold. Flanked by his aides and guards bearing torches, he didn't seem at all concerned about his surroundings. Master Leeds, Clara said, have you any idea what's been planned for the feast? The beastmen show hospitality by providing food and shelter, the guildmaster replied. As far as entertainment goes, the big warrior clans tend to attract all the bards. That's not unlike how things are for human hosts, Florine said. In a basic sense. Inns, food stands, and the like exist in Rolengork as well, but there's much to be improved upon. I'd like to work on those once things are stabilized and we have the industries to support it. You seem quite driven. I suppose that might seem strange, given my people's history with the beastmen. This is part of the Merchant Guild's role, though. The world has left Rolengork behind and now we're here to catch it back up. One day, trade with their neighbors will become the first recourse instead of war. It was an admirable enough vision for the future, but it created far too many unknowns along the way. Clara wasn't certain what the Sorceress Kingdom's royal court would do if Rolengork did anything other than fall completely under their expanding sphere of influence. At the least, it would turn any competing powers into enemies, and that didn't bode well for Clara's desire to peacefully extend the Sorceress Kingdom's political and economic reach. When they arrived at Lady Shawk's court, they found that it was already filled with guests. Well-stocked braziers cast dancing shadows in every direction as beastmen of all types sat upon rugs arranged along rows of wooden tables. She spotted a group of Ludmilla's subjects sitting across from a crowd of beastmen, not far from a table set for human guests. Master Leeds went to speak with his associates seated there while Ludmilla led them to join her subjects. You left Nemel alone up here. I'm surprised she hasn't zapped anyone, or has she? She isn't alone. In fact, it appears that she's fitting in quite well. As Ludmilla observed, the Imperial Scion seemed to be excitedly chatting with the beastmen directly in front of her. As they drew closer, Clara recognized several of the demi-human mystics she had been introduced to during her visits to Warden's Vale. And you were so reluctant to come with me earlier today, Ludmilla said. Nemel abruptly stopped speaking to turn and offer a curtsy. Ah, Lady Zaradnik, welcome back. We were just discussing some shared interests with Elder Potley and his associates. He's the senior druid of Clan Packen. Figures, Leanne said. A wizard would jump into a dragon's mouth the moment magic is involved. They would? Dame Verilyn asked. Of course not, Nemel said. Says the wizard who nearly jumped down the black scale dragon lord's throat. You did? Dame Verilyn asked. I didn't. I dunno, Leanne said, them words of hers seemed mighty temptin'. What are you talking about with Elder Potley? Ludmilla asked. Mostly about magic in Rolengork, my lady, Nemel answered. It's quite fascinating. Being raised in the Empire, I always thought that demi-human tribes were all the same or at least similar when it came to their use of mystics and approach to magic. Since moving to Warden's Vale, I've learned that it's far from the case, but it never ceases to amaze me how different things can be. The mystics here are just as different in their philosophies and implementation of magic from our lizard men as our lizard men are from our orcs. Practically speaking, The ratio of magic casters in Rolengork and their level of participation in all aspects of life reaches a level that probably matches the slain theocracy. Yet they don't seem to be anywhere near as advanced as the slain theocracy, magically speaking. The differentiating factor would be time, Nemel said. Rolengork has achieved what it has in 5 or 6 generations while the theocracy has existed for 6 centuries. As someone from the Empire, I can appreciate how much time, talent, and resources would need to go into managing such a feat. They've even done so as a collection of independent clans rather than under the direction of a single government. I see. Well, we should let you get back to your discussion. I look forward to hearing more about what you've discovered. Yes, my lady. Next, we should pay our respects to Lady Shork. The setting was familiar enough that the behaviors drilled into them since childhood made the decision mindless. To their surprise, however, Lady Shork left her seat to come down and greet them. "Welcome," the Overlord said. "Thank you for this afternoon." "The pleasure was all ours, Lady Shork," Clara replied. "Once our cargo is unloaded, you can expect the first proper shipment to arrive within a week." "That quickly?" "Our barges would only make it halfway out of the jungle in that time." "We are quite proud of our vessels," Clara smiled. "They are the backbone of our economic ventures." "Do you trade with a lot of places?" Lady Shork asked. "The Sorceress Kingdom has only recently established itself, my lady," Clara answered, "so we've only begun to make connections within the region. Speaking of which, what are your future plans when it comes to relations with the outside world?" "I haven't really thought about it," Lady Shork replied. "I already have my paws full leading my clan. Decisions like that are for the Confederation Council, anyway." "Do they control trade, as well?" Leanne asked. "Master Lead seems to be moving forward with his own plans without their approval." No. The Council mainly oversees the defense of Rolengork. Merchants work for individual clans and the clans operate independently when it comes to their day-to-day business. So relations with foreign powers count as day-to-day business? Yes, no. I think just trade should be fine. The southern clans deal with a great loot, after all. But I'm sure anything more than that will count as a matter of collective security. Their collection of customs puts them in an interesting bind. Not that we're any better. Leanne had a point. Much of human society had the same blind spots as Rolengork when it came to their leadership. The nobility had formed out of what were essentially military governors whose primary purpose was to secure their lands against hostile threats and enforce local laws. These responsibilities still remained at the core of what it meant to be a noble, while other aspects of rulership were considered secondary priorities. The quality of a noble when it came to fields such as commerce, technological development, and magic varied from person to person. That being said, even those who could be classified as civilian nobles tended to specialize in fields that contributed to their ability to compete with other nobles in the civilian arena, such as diplomacy, espionage, and the fine arts. Does that mean there are no existing protocols when it comes to peaceful dealings between two countries, Lady Shork? How can there be? The Overlord replied, "We are in a state of permanent war with our eastern and northern neighbors. The South is only interested in the salt trade. And the West, well, our history with the West isn't so great and now it's just infested with undead anyway." "If you're interested," Ludmilla said, "we were about to go discuss some related matters with some of your elders." "You are?" "Yes, my lady. They seem quite eager to assist you on matters of governance, so Countess Corlin has generously volunteered to advise them on how Clan Packen might be able to adapt to the change it faces." "We'd really appreciate it if you did," Lady Shork said. "I think I have an idea about what needs to be done, but I have no idea how to do it and no time to figure things out. You know, maybe it isn't Master Lead's fault that he's getting away with everything. I appreciate someone who can truly trust others. Yeah, until they decide to trust your enemies. I wouldn't be surprised if she stopped following your advice in favor of the next person giving her advice. I find it hard to believe that will be the case." Institutions were inherently conservative, after all. She couldn't imagine the sort of flip-flopping in policy that Leanne suggested if Clan Pacan had enough departments available to oversee daily governance and recognize change that was too radical for the established order or outright detrimental to society. Ludmilla brought them to the side on the opposite side of the court to the human seating. The Osalo gathered their rows to greet them as they approached. Baroness Ludmilla, one near the center of the group, said, "I see you managed to bring Countess Shawk with you." "It's not as if they dragged me here," Lady Shawk said defensively. "I heard that you were going to talk about something that might help with some of the things we haven't been able to figure out." "Indeed," the elder said. "We haven't heard any of the details yet, but I find Baroness Ludmilla's attitude towards us is far more amenable than that of certain other outsiders," Ludmilla said as she peeled Clara's hand from her elbow and nudged her forward. "Countess Corlin here is the person I spoke of," Ludmilla said. "I'm certain she can help you lay the foundation of what your people need for the future. Countess Corlin, this is Elder Char AC." Clara did her best not to cringe as the assembled beastmen scrutinized her. "Your reputation precedes you," the elder said in growly tones. "We were present during your introduction earlier today, but we never realized that you were also a mighty warrior. We look forward to hearing the wisdom of such a venerable human lord." "A what?" "I'm sure you won't be disappointed," Ludmilla smiled.